Arrogance, known in Islamic terminology as kibr, represents a fundamental malady of the soul and is ranked among the major sins due to its insidious nature and its direct challenge to divine sovereignty. Islamic tradition identifies it as the primordial sin, the very transgression committed by Iblis or Satan, who refused Allah's command to prostrate to Adam out of a sense of superior origin, declaring, as the Quran narrates, "I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay." This act of cosmic defiance establishes arrogance as the root of disobedience and rebellion. Prophetic tradition further defines kibr not as the appreciation of fine garments or good presentation, but through two core components: Batr al-Haq, the rejection of truth after it has become clear, and Gamt an-Nas, the belittling and looking down upon other people. The arrogant individual, blinded by self-admiration, dismisses guidance and scorns fellow human beings, viewing them as inferior. The worldly consequences of kibr manifest as social alienation, conflict, and the inability to maintain healthy relationships, as the arrogant person's condescension inevitably repels others and sows discord within the community. Spiritually, its impact is far more catastrophic. An authenticated hadith states with chilling finality, "He who has in his heart the weight of a mustard seed of arrogance shall not enter paradise." This is because arrogance creates a veil between the individual and God, preventing the light of faith and humility from penetrating the heart. On the day of judgment, traditional sources describe the arrogant being resurrected as tiny as ants, trampled under the feet of all creation, a state of ultimate humiliation directly proportional to the grandiosity they displayed in life. They will be driven into a prison in hell called Bolas, with the hottest fire raging over them, and will be given to drink the festering pus of the inhabitants of the fire. It is a sin that eats away at good deeds and corrupts worship, rendering acts of piety hollow, ultimately sealing the heart against the very mercy it so desperately needs. Disrespect toward parents, termed uquq al-walidain in classical Arabic, stands as a grave transgression in Islam, often mentioned in the Quran immediately after the prohibition of associating partners with Allah, demonstrating its critical importance. This sin is defined as any act, word, or attitude that causes grief or harm to one's parents, encompassing disobedience to their reasonable and Islamically permissible commands, speaking to them in a harsh tone, showing irritation or impatience, or neglecting their needs, particularly in their old age. The foundational source for the elevated status of parents is the Quran itself, which commands, "And your Lord has decreed that you not worship except Him, and to parents, good treatment. Whether one or both of them reach old age, while with you, say not to them so much as uff, and do not repel them, but speak to them a noble word." Prophetic traditions reinforce this, with the Prophet Muhammad listing it as second only to shirk when asked about the greatest sins. Worldly consequences for this sin are often described as being hastened in this life before the next. Islamic scholars and traditional narratives suggest that one who is undutiful to their parents may face difficulties in their own life, a loss of blessings, barakah, in their wealth and time, and may even suffer similar treatment from their own children, creating a generational cycle of distress. The social fabric is torn by this sin, as the fundamental unit of the family built on respect and mercy is undermined. The spiritual ramifications are severe. It is considered a deed that can block a person's path to paradise, regardless of their other righteous acts. A well-known hadith narrates that the pleasure of Allah is found in the pleasure of the parents, and the wrath of Allah is found in the wrath of the parents. On the day of judgment, the individual who was undutiful will find their path to forgiveness obstructed. It is taught that certain supplications are readily answered, including the prayer of a parent against their child. This sin closes the doors of divine mercy and ensures a painful reckoning both in the temporal world and in the eternal hereafter. Unless sincere repentance is made and forgiveness from the parents is secured. Bearing false witness, or shahadat al-zur, is a major sin that strikes at the very foundation of a just society, corrupting legal processes and violating the rights of the innocent. It is defined as knowingly giving a false testimony in a matter of legal or social importance, thereby misleading a judge, arbitrator, or the community into a wrongful conclusion. The Quran condemns this act in the strongest terms, often pairing it with the gravest of sins. In Surah Al-Furqan, when describing the qualities of the true servants of the Most Merciful, it states, "And they are those who do not witness falsehood, and when they pass by ill speech, they pass by with dignity." The Prophet Muhammad explicitly and repeatedly warned against it, once rising from a reclining position to a state of anger to emphasize its severity. He reportedly asked his companions, "Shall I not tell you of the greatest of major sins?" And after listing shirk and disrespect to parents, he sat up and vehemently repeated, "And indeed the false statement and the false testimony," continuing to do so until his companions wished he would stop out of compassion for him. The worldly consequence of this sin is the complete collapse of justice. It allows the guilty to go free and the innocent to be punished, property to be stolen, honor to be defamed, and lives to be ruined or even taken. Within Islamic jurisprudence, a person proven to be a false witness is permanently discredited. Their future testimony is rendered inadmissible, making them a permanent outcast from legal and social processes. They are often subjected to a discretionary punishment, ta'zir, by the judge, which could include flogging, public humiliation, or imprisonment to deter others. Spiritually, the sin is a compound of several evils: lying, deception, and grave injustice. On the day of judgment, the false witness will be brought forth to face their victim before Allah. The limbs of the witness which were party to the deception will themselves testify against the person. Traditional sources describe the false witness as having their place secured in the hellfire from the moment the lie leaves their lips, before they even move from their spot. It is a sin that not only accrues a massive burden for the liar, but also transfers the burden of the injustice they caused onto their own scales, ensuring a reckoning of terrifying proportions. The act of wrongfully consuming the property of an orphan is a sin of such gravity that it is singled out for specific and dire warnings in Islamic scripture, representing a profound breach of social trust and divine command. An orphan in Islam is a child who has lost their father before reaching the age of puberty, and the community, along with any appointed guardian, is charged with their protection and the safeguarding of their inheritance. This sin, therefore, is not merely theft, but a violation of a sacred trust placed upon an individual to care for the most vulnerable. The Quran addresses this directly with a terrifying image in Surah An-Nisa. "Indeed, those who devour the property of orphans unjustly are only eating fire into their bellies, and they will be burned in a blazing fire." This verse is not metaphorical in the view of many classical scholars. It describes a literal reality where the illicitly consumed wealth transforms into hellfire itself. The Prophet Muhammad listed this act among the 7 destroyers, the major sins that lead to a person's ruin in this life and the next. The worldly consequences extend beyond the immediate financial loss to the orphan. It creates a society where the vulnerable are preyed upon, destroying the communal bonds of mercy and responsibility. A guardian who misappropriates funds not only commits a crime, but also sets a devastating example, eroding the very structure of social welfare mandated by the faith. From a legal standpoint, a guardian found guilty of such a crime faces severe penalties, including the forced return of all misappropriated assets, potential imprisonment, and the permanent loss of their status as a trustworthy individual. Spiritually, the consequences are directly tied to the Quranic warning. The act of eating fire symbolizes a spiritual self-destruction, where the sinner's very being becomes filled with the essence of their transgression. On the day of judgment, it is narrated that such individuals will be resurrected with smoke and flames issuing from their mouths, ears, and noses, a public and humiliating exposure of their crime for all of creation to witness. They will stand before Allah not only as thieves but as betrayers of the highest order, having violated a direct command to protect and nurture those whom God Himself has taken under His special care. The consumption and transaction of interest, known as riba, is categorized in Islam as one of the most destructive major sins, constituting a declaration of war against Allah and His Messenger. Riba is broadly defined as any predetermined guaranteed excess or surplus in a loan or exchange of like commodities, without any corresponding value, labor, or risk. While modern discussions often focus on financial interest from bank loans, the classical prohibition covers both riba al-fadl, surplus in the exchange of goods of the same type, and riba al-nasiya, interest on lent money. The Quran's prohibition is progressive and culminates in an absolute and unequivocal condemnation in Surah Al-Baqarah. O you who have believed, fear Allah and give up what remains due to you of interest if you are believers. And if you do not, then be notified of a war from Allah and His Messenger. This declaration elevates riba from a mere financial misdemeanor to an act of open hostility against the divine. The Prophet Muhammad cursed the one who consumes riba, the one who pays it, the one who writes down the contract, and the two who witness it, stating they are all equal in sin. The worldly consequences of a riba-based system, according to Islamic economic theory, are systemic injustice, the concentration of wealth in the hands of the few, the exploitation of the poor and indebted, and the creation of economic instability. It encourages hoarding and discourages the risk-sharing, enterprise-based investment that Islam promotes. It transforms a society from one of mutual support to one of predatory lending. The spiritual consequences are depicted in the most graphic terms. The Quran states that on the day of judgment, those who consumed riba will not stand on the day of resurrection, except like the standing of a person beaten by Satan into insanity. This image of madness, chaos, and loss of control reflects the moral and spiritual derangement caused by their actions. Prophetic narrations from the night journey, Isra and Miraj, describe the Prophet witnessing people with bellies as large as houses filled with snakes that could be seen from the outside, unable to move from their places and being trampled by the people of Pharaoh. When he asked who they were, he was told they were the consumers of riba. The sin is considered so potent that some hadith traditions state that a single dirham of riba knowingly consumed is worse than committing adultery 36 times, highlighting its profound spiritual corruption. Fleeing from the battlefield, specifically from a legitimate Islamic military engagement, is considered a major sin and an act of profound cowardice and betrayal. This sin, known as al-Tawali Yawm al-Zaf, refers to the act of deserting the army as it advances to meet the enemy. It is explicitly listed in the Quran as an act that incurs the wrath of Allah. Surah Al-Anfal states, O you who have believed, when you meet those who disbelieve advancing for battle, do not turn to them your backs in flight, and whoever turns his back to them on such a day, unless as a tactical maneuver for battle or to join another company, has certainly returned with wrath from Allah. And his refuge is hell, and wretched is the destination. The severity of this sin stems from its multifaceted harm. It not only demonstrates a weakness of faith and a preference for temporal life over divine promise, but also directly endangers the entire community. A single soldier or a group fleeing can break the morale of the army, compromise strategic positions, and lead to a catastrophic defeat, resulting in the death of their comrades and the subjugation of their people. The Prophet Muhammad counted it among the 7 great destructive sins. Historically, during the early battles of Islam, the steadfastness of the believers was paramount. The act of fleeing was thus seen not just as a military crime, but as a spiritual failure, a rejection of the promise of either victory or martyrdom, both of which are considered blessings. The worldly consequence under a functioning Islamic state would be severe disciplinary action, potentially including execution, as it constitutes high treason. The social consequence is utter disgrace. The spiritual consequence is precisely as the Quran describes, returning with the anger of God upon one's head and a guaranteed place in hell. The exception provided in the verse, for tactical retreat or regrouping, makes a clear distinction between cowardice and strategy, emphasizing that the prohibition is against the selfish, fear-driven act of abandonment. On the day of judgment, the deserter is a traitor not only to their earthly army but to the covenant of faith itself. They chose personal safety over the defense of the community and the principle of standing for the truth. And their punishment will be a reflection of that betrayal, facing the undiluted wrath of the one they abandoned their post for. The act of slandering chaste, believing women by accusing them of illicit sexual conduct known as qadhf, is a major sin so serious that it is addressed with a specific prescribed legal punishment and a severe spiritual warning. This sin involves publicly accusing a respectable innocent man or woman of zina, fornication, or adultery without producing the requisite 4 male upright witnesses who saw the act of penetration itself. The Quran is explicit in its condemnation and outlines the consequences in Surah An-Nur. And those who accuse chaste women and then do not produce 4 witnesses flog them with 80 stripes and do not accept their testimony ever after. And it is they who are the defiantly disobedient. This verse establishes a tripartite punishment that devastates the accuser's worldly standing. First, there is a severe physical punishment of 80 lashes, a public and painful retribution. Second, there is a permanent social and legal consequence. Their testimony is forever rendered invalid in a court of law, effectively destroying their credibility and participation in the justice system. Third, they are spiritually branded by Allah Himself as fasikun, defiantly disobedient, corrupt individuals. This sin is considered major because it attacks the honor, ird, of an individual, which is considered one of the sacred values Islam seeks to protect. An unsubstantiated accusation can destroy a person's reputation, ruin marriage prospects, break apart families, and create lasting enmity and suspicion within the community. The requirement of 4 witnesses for the act itself makes a conviction for zina extremely difficult, demonstrating that the legal system is designed to protect privacy and reputation, prioritizing the assumption of innocence. The spiritual consequences are equally severe. The Quran further states, "Indeed, those who falsely accuse chaste, unaware, and believing women are cursed in this world and the hereafter, and for them is a great punishment." The accuser earns a divine curse, which signifies being deprived of Allah's mercy. On the day of judgment, the slanderer will face their victim in the court of Allah, where no falsehood can stand. Their own tongues, hands, and feet will testify against them regarding what they used to do. The sin is an act of profound injustice, and the slanderer will have to pay from their own good deeds to compensate the victim. And if they have none left, they will be forced to take on the sins of the one they slandered, ensuring their own spiritual bankruptcy and ruin. Theft or sarika is defined in Islamic jurisprudence as the act of secretly taking the property of another from its secure location, hirts, without their consent, with the intention of keeping it. It is classified as a major sin and is one of the few crimes for which a specific mandatory punishment, had, is prescribed in the Quran. Surah Al-Ma'idah states, And as for the male thief and the female thief, amputate their hands in recompense for what they committed as a deterrent punishment from Allah. And Allah is exalted in might and wise. This severe prescription underscores the sanctity of private property in Islam and the importance of maintaining social order and security. However, the application of this punishment by classical jurists is subject to stringent conditions that are often overlooked. The stolen item must exceed a certain minimum value, nisab. It must be taken from a place of security, and the act must be done with stealth. Furthermore, there must be no doubt, shubha, in the case. For instance, a person stealing out of extreme life-threatening hunger would not typically be subject to this punishment, as the Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab famously suspended it during a famine. The worldly consequence, when all conditions are met and the crime is proven without a shadow of a doubt in an Islamic court, is the amputation of the hand. This punishment serves not only as retribution and a purification for the sinner, but also as a powerful public deterrent, nakal, to protect the wealth of the community. Beyond the legal sphere, theft erodes trust and security, making commerce and daily life precarious. The spiritual consequence of theft is profound. It is an act of injustice that darkens the heart and demonstrates a lack of faith in Allah as the ultimate provider. The Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said, "The adulterer is not a believer while he is committing adultery, and the thief is not a believer while he is stealing." This indicates a state of temporary functional disbelief at the moment of the sin, a complete disconnect from one's fear and awareness of God. On the day of judgment, the thief will be brought to account. It is narrated that a person who has stolen will come carrying their stolen goods on their back, a public humiliation and a physical representation of their burden of sin. They must then repay the one they stole from, either with their good deeds or by taking on the victim's sins, a transaction that leads to spiritual destitution before entry into the fire, unless they had repented sincerely and made restitution in the worldly life. Unlawful sexual intercourse, known as zina, is one of the most severe major sins in Islam, encompassing both fornication, intercourse between two unmarried people, and adultery, intercourse involving at least one married person. It is unequivocally forbidden, and the Quran commands believers not to even approach it. And do not approach unlawful sexual intercourse. Indeed, it is ever an immorality and is evil as a way. This prohibition is absolute because zina strikes at the heart of the family structure, which Islam seeks to protect. It corrupts lineage, creates confusion regarding paternity, spreads disease, destroys social honor, and leads to a breakdown of societal morality. Islamic law makes a clear distinction in its prescribed punishment. For fornication, proven by the confession of the perpetrator or the testimony of 4 male witnesses to the act of penetration, the Quran prescribes 100 lashes for both the man and the woman, as stated in Surah An-Nur, to be carried out publicly as a deterrent. For adultery, the punishment established through the Sunnah, or prophetic practice, is death by stoning, rajam, a punishment of extreme severity reserved for the violation of the sacred marital bond. The worldly consequences, even when the prescribed punishments are not applied due to the stringent evidentiary requirements, are immense. Zina leads to the destruction of families, honor killings in some cultures, though this is itself a prohibited sin, unwanted children, and a general state of social decay and mistrust. It is a gateway to other sins, including lying, deception, and even violence. The spiritual consequences are devastating. Like theft, it is a sin that the Prophet stated a person cannot be a believer while actively committing, indicating a catastrophic failure of faith, iman, at the moment of the act. The sin creates a darkness and impurity in the heart and soul. On the Day of Judgment, the consequences are described in horrific terms. In a lengthy hadith describing the Prophet's night journey, He witnessed people in an oven-like enclosure, naked with a fire blazing beneath them. Whenever the fire flared up, they would scream and rise up, only to fall back down. He was told that these were the adulterers and adulteresses. Their punishment is a public, agonizing, and cyclical torment, a reflection of the fleeting, illicit pleasure they sought in the world. It is a sin that combines defiance of God's command with a profound injustice to oneself, one's family, and the entire social order. The act of unjustly taking a human life, qatl al-nafs, is a transgression of colossal magnitude in Islam, ranked as one of the gravest sins after shirk. The sanctity of human life is a cornerstone of Islamic law and ethics, and the Quran equates the murder of a single individual with the murder of all of humanity. In Surah Al-Ma'idah it states, "Whoever kills a soul unless for a soul or for corruption done in the land, it is as if he had slain mankind entirely. And whoever saves one, it is as if he had saved mankind entirely." This verse establishes the immense value of every individual life. The prohibition is absolute, covering any form of intentional unlawful killing. Islamic jurisprudence, fiqh, meticulously categorizes homicide into intentional murder, qatl al-amd, quasi-intentional murder, and accidental killing, each with different legal consequences. For intentional murder, the worldly consequence is qisas, the law of just retribution, which gives the family of the victim the right to demand the execution of the murderer, although they are strongly encouraged by the Quran to forgive or accept blood money diya as an alternative. This choice places the final decision in the hands of those most wronged, allowing for either justice or mercy to prevail. If the killer is not brought to justice in this world, or even if they are, the spiritual consequences are eternal and inescapable. The Quran specifies a unique and terrifying multi-layered punishment for a believer who intentionally kills another believer in Surah An-Nisa. But whoever kills a believer intentionally, his recompense is hell, wherein he will abide eternally, and Allah has become angry with him and has cursed him and has prepared for him a great punishment. Scholars have noted that Allah specifies 5 distinct consequences here. 1. His recompense is Jahannam, hell. 2. He will abide therein eternally, khalidan fiha. 3. Allah's anger is upon him, ghadab Allahu alayhi. 4. He is cursed by Allah, wal'anahu, meaning deprived of his mercy. And 5. A great punishment has been prepared for him, adhaban adhima. This explicit and compounded divine sentence makes it clear that murder is a sin that shatters one's relationship with God. On the Day of Judgment, it is narrated in an authenticated hadith that the first cases to be judged between people will be those of bloodshed. The victim will come forward holding their own severed head, their veins gushing with blood, and will cling to their killer, dragging them before the throne of Allah and demanding justice, saying, "O Lord, ask this one why he killed me." In that court there will be no escape from the truth and no escape from the devastating verdict. Sorcery, or seer, is an act unequivocally classified as an act of disbelief, kufr, and a major sin that leads to ruin in this life and the next. It is defined as any practice that seeks to alter the natural course of events or affect a person's body, heart, or mind through illicit means, often involving the assistance of malevolent jinn or shayateen, devils. The Quran confirms the reality of sorcery but condemns its practice in the strongest possible terms. The story of the angels Harut and Marut in Babylon mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah illustrates this. They would teach magic to people only after explicitly warning them. "We are but a trial, so do not disbelieve." Those who pursued it anyway did so knowing they were trading their faith for worldly power or malice, and the verse concludes that they purchased it, magic, for the price of their souls, knowing they would have no share in the hereafter. The Prophet Muhammad also listed it as one of the 7 destructive sins. The practice of shirk is a direct affront to the sovereignty of Allah, as it represents an attempt to usurp knowledge of the unseen, al-ghaib, and to cause harm or benefit outside of the means that God has ordained. It involves rituals and incantations that often include acts of polytheism and sacrilege, such as defiling the Quran or making sacrifices to entities other than Allah. The worldly consequences for the practitioner, under a state ruling by Islamic law, are severe. The consensus among many early scholars, including the companions of the Prophet, was that the prescribed punishment for a sorcerer is death, due to their corruption on earth and their apostasy. For the victim, the consequences can be devastating, ranging from illness and psychological torment to the dissolution of marriages and the destruction of businesses. The spiritual consequence for the sorcerer is total and absolute damnation. By engaging in sihr, they have made a pact with forces of darkness and have willfully stepped outside the fold of Islam. They are considered to have nullified their faith. The Quran's statement that they have no share in the hereafter is a chillingly final verdict. Their deeds are rendered worthless, and their alliance with Satan will be of no use to them on the day of judgment. Instead, they will be resurrected with the very devils they sought help from, and cast into the fire together, having traded eternal bliss for a fleeting and evil power in a transient world. Apostasy, known as ridda in Arabic, is the act of a Muslim consciously rejecting and abandoning the faith of Islam after having accepted it. This is considered one of the gravest sins, as it represents the ultimate betrayal of the covenant between a servant and their Creator. Apostasy can occur through belief, such as denying a fundamental and known tenet of the religion, like the finality of Prophet Muhammad's prophethood or the existence of Allah. Through a statement, such as explicitly declaring disbelief or mocking God, His prophets, or His revelations. Or through an action, such as prostrating to an idol or intentionally desecrating a copy of the Quran. The Quran speaks of apostates in dire terms, promising them a severe punishment in the hereafter. Surah Al-Baqarah states, "And whoever of you reverts from his religion and dies while he is a disbeliever, for those their deeds have become worthless in this world and the hereafter, and those are the companions of the fire, they will abide therein eternally." This verse highlights the primary spiritual consequence: complete nullification of all past good deeds. No matter how righteous a person may have been, the act of dying upon apostasy wipes their spiritual slate clean, but not in a positive way. It erases all their merits, leaving only a burden of sin. The historical and legal worldly consequence of apostasy has been a subject of extensive debate in Islamic jurisprudence. The classical position, derived from hadith literature such as "whoever changes his religion, then kill him," held that the punishment for a public declaration of apostasy, viewed as an act of treason against the state and community, was death. This was historically applied in the context of political rebellion against the early Muslim state, such as during the Ridda Wars after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, where tribes who had pledged allegiance renounced Islam and refused to pay the obligatory charity, zakat. Modern interpretations vary, with many scholars arguing that the punishment is not for a private change of belief, but for public acts of rebellion and incitement that threaten the social order. Regardless of the worldly punishment, the spiritual consequence is unanimously agreed upon. The apostate who dies without repenting and returning to Islam has sealed their own fate. They have consciously chosen to sever their connection with the divine, and as a result, they will find themselves utterly abandoned by God's mercy on the day of judgment. Their end is the eternal fire, a destination they chose for themselves when they turned their back on the truth they once knew. Shirk, the act of associating partners with Allah, stands alone as the single most heinous and unforgivable sin in Islam if a person dies upon it without having repented. It is the ultimate transgression, a spiritual crime of such magnitude that it eclipses all others. The Quran is absolutely explicit on this matter in Surah An-Nisa. Indeed, Allah does not forgive that partners be associated with Him, but He forgives what is less than that for whom He wills. And he who associates partners with Allah has certainly fabricated a tremendous sin. This singular status is because the very foundation of Islam, its central message and the core of its creed, is the principle of Tawheed, the absolute uncompromising oneness and uniqueness of God. Shirk is the direct negation of this principle. It is an act of supreme injustice, zulm, as the Quran quotes Luqman advising his son, "O my son, do not associate anything with Allah. Indeed, association with Him is a great injustice. It is an injustice because it gives the rights and attributes of the Creator to the creation." Islamic scholars categorize shirk into two main types. The first is shirk akbar, major shirk, which involves overt acts of polytheism such as worshipping an idol, a saint, or a celestial body, praying to or seeking help from someone other than Allah for things only He can provide, or believing that another being shares in Allah's divinity, sovereignty, or attributes. This form of shirk removes a person from the fold of Islam entirely, and according to the Quran, guarantees eternal damnation. It nullifies every good deed performed. The second type is shirk asgar, minor shirk, which does not expel one from the faith but is a grave sin that severely diminishes rewards. This includes acts done to show off to others rather than for the sake of Allah, known as riyah, swearing by anything other than Allah, or believing in omens and superstitions. While it is not the unpardonable shirk akbar, the Prophet warned it was more subtle and feared it for his community more than the Antichrist. The ultimate consequence of dying upon major shirk is eternal residence in the hellfire. The Quran states that for such a person, paradise is forbidden. On the day of judgment, all their supposed intercessors will abandon them and they will be confronted with the futility of their beliefs. It is the one sin that closes the door to divine mercy permanently, the final and irreversible act of spiritual suicide.